My parents told me I was too ugly to be in family photos, but I proved them wrong. I was 8 years old the first time I realized I wasn't meant to be seen. It was a cold December afternoon, and my mother had gathered everyone in the living room for our annual family photo card. My siblings, my older brother Nathan and my younger sister Lily, were dressed in matching outfits, their hair neatly combed, their smiles bright and effortless. I had stood beside them, fidgeting slightly, waiting for my turn in front of the camera. But then, just as the photographer was about to snap the picture, my mother's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Wait, move over." I froze. She frowned, looking at me the way someone might look at a stain on an otherwise perfect white dress. No, further back. Actually, why don't you sit this one out?" My breath hitched. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something, waiting for anyone to object. But he just adjusted his tie, not even sparing me a glance. My mother's lips curved into something cold and forced. "You don't really photograph well, sweetie. We want this to be a nice picture." And just like that, I was erased. At first, I tried to believe it was a mistake, that maybe I had imagined it, that maybe next time I would be included. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Every family portrait, every holiday card, every framed picture that lined the walls of our house. I was missing from all of them. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. And the worst part? No one said anything. Not my father, not my siblings. No one questioned my absence. Because to them, I was never supposed to be there in the first place. By the time I was 13, I had stopped trying. I stopped asking why I wasn't included in the photos. Stopped hoping that one day my parents would see me as more than just a flaw in their perfect image. But that didn't mean the hurt went away. It settled in my bones, in the way I carried myself, in the way I avoided mirrors, because every time I looked, I wondered if I really was as unworthy as they made me feel. Was my nose too big? My smile too awkward? Was I so ugly that my own parents couldn't bear to see me in a photograph? I told myself I didn't care, that their approval meant nothing. But deep down I did. I cared more than I wanted to admit, because how could I not, when the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had made it clear that I was only lovable if I was out of sight? The turning point came when I was 17. It was supposed to be Nathan's big graduation party, a grand celebration of his achievements, complete with a professional photographer, catered food, and a venue my parents had rented out for the occasion. I hadn't expected much. I had learned by then that I was never the priority. But I still thought, hoped, that maybe this time I would at least be allowed to exist. I was wrong. I was standing near the buffet table, sipping a glass of soda, when I heard it. A quiet voice, a hushed conversation, but the words cut through me like glass. "She's going to ruin the pictures," my mother whispered to my father, glancing at me from across the room. "We should take them before she notices." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, not in sadness, but in something far more dangerous: determination. Because if they thought I wasn't good enough to be in their pictures, if they believed I wasn't worthy of being seen, I was going to prove them wrong in the loudest way possible. I left home 2 weeks after graduating high school. I didn't tell them my plans. I didn't ask for their permission, because I had spent 17 years waiting for their validation, and I was done waiting. I worked 2 jobs, saved every dollar, took night classes while balancing shifts at a coffee shop just to keep myself afloat. And slowly, piece by piece, I started building myself back up. Not for them, not for their approval, but for me. By the time I turned 24, I had done what they never thought possible. I had made a name for myself, not just as some faceless nobody in the background, but as someone the world couldn't ignore. Through grit and sheer force of will, I built a successful career in the fashion industry, an industry that demanded confidence, presence, and an unyielding belief in one's own worth. I became a model, not in the conventional sense, but in a way that rewrote the rules of what beauty was supposed to look like. I walked runways, appeared in magazines. I became the face of campaigns that championed diversity, that celebrated people who had been told, like I once had, that they weren't right for the spotlight. And one day, after years of silence, my mother finally reached out. It was an email, short, carefully worded. "We saw your latest feature. We're so proud of you. We'd love to have you over for dinner sometime." As if the past had never happened. As if the years of exclusion, of erasure, of telling me I wasn't good enough to be in their world, meant nothing. As if I would just forget. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt free. Because I finally understood that their approval had never mattered. That it had never been my fault. That their inability to see my worth had always been their failure, not mine. So I didn't respond. I didn't give them the closure they wanted. Because some people don't deserve a second chance. And I wasn't going to shrink myself just to fit into their picture. Years later, when people walked into my home, they always noticed one thing first. The walls, lined with photographs of places I had traveled, of friendships I had built, of moments where I was laughing, radiant, alive. Photos where I was the center of the frame, not an afterthought. Because I had learned something my parents never had. Beauty isn't about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself. The moment I ignored my mother's email, I knew it wouldn't be the last I heard from her. People like my parents didn't suddenly develop a conscience after years of cruelty. They didn't reach out because they had an epiphany, because they realized their mistakes, or because they had any genuine desire to make things right. No, they reached out because they saw something they wanted. And this time, that something was me. I had spent my entire life being treated like a shadow, the flaw in their perfect family portrait, the inconvenient mistake they wished they could crop out. But now I wasn't invisible anymore. And that terrified them. The calls started a week later. First from my mother, then from my father, then from numbers I didn't recognize but could easily guess. I didn't answer. Because what was there to say? What could they possibly tell me that would erase the years of exclusion, dismissal, and rejection? Nothing. But they weren't the type to give up so easily. They had spent years pretending I didn't exist, but now that I did, they wanted a say in how I did it. So the next thing they tried was sending Lily. I had just finished a shoot when I spotted her waiting for me outside the building, shifting nervously on her feet. Lily, my younger sister, the one who had been placed in the family portraits while I was pushed aside. The one who had never spoken up, never questioned why I was left out, never looked back when I disappeared from their lives. For years, I had wondered if she even noticed, if she had ever stopped to think about what it must have felt like to be erased. But she never reached out, not once, until now. She caught my eye and waved, forcing a bright, practiced smile, the same kind of perfect, effortless charm that had always worked on our parents. I walked over, stopping just short of her. Lily. Her smile faltered slightly. "Hey, it's been a while." I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" She bit her lip as if pretending to hesitate, as if this wasn't a conversation she had already rehearsed in her head. "Mom and Dad, they just want to talk," she said carefully. "They miss you." I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "They miss me?" I repeated. "Or they miss having control over me?" Lily sighed. "Look, I get it. You're upset." Upset. What a small, inadequate word for what they had done to me. I tilted my head, my voice dangerously calm. "Tell me something, Lily. Did it ever bother you?" Her brows furrowed. "Did what bother me? That I wasn't in the pictures, that they made me stand aside, that I didn't exist to them." She hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw everything. Because the truth was, she had never cared. She had grown up seeing me erased and never once questioned it. Because she never had to. She had been the golden child, the one they showcased, the one who never had to fight to be seen. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "Go home, Lily." She reached for my arm. "Please, just give them a chance to explain." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "There's nothing left to explain," I said. "I know exactly who they are. The question is, do you?" Her lips parted slightly, but she had no answer, because deep down, she knew. She just wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After Lily left, I expected my parents to back off, to take the hint. to finally accept that I wasn't playing their game anymore. But instead they escalated, because if manipulation didn't work, they would try something else, something bigger, something public. I woke up the next morning to a flood of messages. My phone buzzed relentlessly. My inbox flooded with links, texts from friends, cryptic warnings that all led back to one thing: a public statement from my parents. We deeply regret the misunderstanding that has caused distance in our family. The post read, carefully worded, crafted with precision, designed to paint them as loving parents trying to mend a broken relationship. We have always loved all of our children equally, and we are saddened by the narrative being spread that suggests otherwise. Family is everything to us, and we hope for reconciliation. And there it was, the trap, the carefully constructed lie, dressed up as a plea for peace. It was never about fixing things. It was about controlling the story. Because if they could make it look like I was the one refusing to come home, the one who was bitter and unforgiving, then they could rewrite history. They could pretend they had never done anything wrong, that they had never erased me, that I was just another ungrateful child who had abandoned them. My jaw clenched as I scrolled through the comments. People who didn't know the truth, people who had only ever seen the picture-perfect version of my family, were sympathizing with them. Parents aren't perfect. Give them a chance. Life is too short to hold grudges. They clearly love you. Why are you being so harsh? They wanted me to look like the villain. But I had spent my entire life in the background, and I was done being silent. So I responded, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the one thing they had always tried to deny me: the truth. I posted a picture, not a childhood photo, because there were none with me in them. Instead, I posted a side-by-side comparison, one of their staged family portraits, with their carefully curated, polished image, and then a picture of me now, standing on the cover of a major magazine, a picture they could never erase. And beneath it, I wrote, "For years, I was told I didn't belong in the family photos, that I wasn't good enough to be seen, that I ruined their perfect image. So I created my own. Now they want to rewrite history. Now they want me back in the picture. But the truth is, I never needed their frame to begin with." The post went viral. Within hours, their carefully crafted narrative fell apart. People started digging, finding the gaps in their story, uncovering the reality of what they had done. And just like that, their power was gone. The final call came 2 days later. My father's voice was low, tired, strained with defeat. "Was this really necessary?" he asked. "Dragging our family through the mud like this?" I let out a quiet breath. "Funny. I was asking myself that question for years every time you pretended I didn't exist." Silence. For the first time, he had no response, because there was nothing left to say. I had spent my entire life waiting for them to see me, to acknowledge me, to act like I was worth something. But I didn't need that anymore, because I had already won. I had built a life where I was seen, where I was valued, where I was more than just a forgotten shadow in the background. And they would have to live with the fact that they had erased the wrong person. My parents had always been masters of denial. For years, they had shaped reality to fit whatever narrative suited them best, rewriting history in their favor, ignoring inconvenient truths, and silencing anything that threatened their perfect family image. And now, their worst fear had come true, because they weren't in control of the story. I was, and they hated it. After my post exposing them went viral, I expected them to go into damage control mode, to double down, manipulate, gaslight, do whatever they could to make themselves the victims. But what I hadn't expected was for them to go quiet, completely. No calls, no texts, no desperate emails filled with carefully worded apologies or thinly veiled attempts to guilt me into taking it down. Just silence. And somehow, that was more unsettling than if they had fought back, because my parents never accepted defeat. They waited for an opening, for a moment of weakness, for the right opportunity to strike. And when it came, it was through Nathan. I was at a late-night event, a networking gala filled with designers, photographers, and models, when my phone buzzed. "Nathan, we need to talk." I stared at the message, my grip tightening around my phone. We? I hadn't spoken to him in years. Nathan had always been the golden son, the one my parents paraded around, the one they poured their pride into while leaving me in the shadows. Growing up, he hadn't been cruel like Emily, but he hadn't been kind either. He had been complicit. He had stood by silent as our parents erased me. And now, he wanted to talk. I didn't respond, but he didn't stop. Nathan, I know you're mad, but let's be reasonable about this. Reasonable? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Where was this reasonableness when I was begging to be seen, when I was watching them pretend I didn't exist? Still, curiosity burned in my chest. I wanted to know why now. Why, after all this time, was he finally reaching out? So I texted back. Me, say what you need to say. His reply came within seconds. Nathan, meet me for coffee, 1 hour. The usual place. I almost rolled my eyes. The usual place. Like we were siblings who regularly met up for casual chats over lattes instead of near strangers connected only by blood and history. But fine. If he wanted to talk, then let's talk. The coffee shop was half empty when I arrived. Nathan was already there, seated in the corner booth, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug, looking every bit the put-together, successful eldest son that our parents had always bragged about. When he saw me, he smiled. Like nothing had happened. Like we were still kids. And I had just walked in late from school instead of blowing up our parents' carefully constructed lie for the world to see. I sat across from him, folding my arms. You have 5 minutes. His smile faltered. Come on. Can we just talk? I arched an eyebrow. That's what I'm here for, isn't it? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, look, I get it. You're angry. I leaned forward. Angry? I echoed. Nathan, I spent years being told I wasn't good enough to be in our family pictures. Do you have any idea what that does to someone? His jaw clenched. I know. I scoffed. Do you? Because I don't remember you ever standing up for me. I don't remember you ever telling them they were wrong. He exhaled, looking down at his coffee. I didn't know what to do. Try saying something. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he muttered, I should have. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was the closest I was ever going to get, and it didn't matter anyway. Because I wasn't here for apologies. I was here to hear the real reason he had reached out, so I tilted my head. Why am I really here, Nathan? He hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he said, Mom and Dad want to meet with you. I let out a slow, deliberate breath. Of course they do. They just want to talk. No, they don't, I said flatly. They want to fix their image. Nathan didn't deny it, because we both knew it was true. I let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. So they send you? What? Did they promise you something in return? His face darkened. That's not what this is. Then what is it? I asked, my voice sharp. Because the only time they've ever acknowledged me is when I became a problem for them. Nathan exhaled, rubbing his temples. Look, I know they screwed up. I know they weren't great parents to you. I barked out a laugh. That's an interesting way of saying they pretended I didn't exist. His gaze flickered with something. Guilt, frustration, discomfort. Good. He should feel uncomfortable, he should feel ashamed. But I wasn't here to make him feel better. I was here to make one thing very, very clear. I leaned in, my voice cold and steady. They made their choice, Nathan, and I made mine. I don't need them. I don't need their fake apologies, their damage control, or their pathetic attempts to save face. His jaw tightened. So that's it? You're cutting them off? I tilted my head. No. I let my words settle before adding, they cut me off first. I'm just letting them live with it. Nathan didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. 2 days later, my parents held a press conference. They sat in front of reporters, their expressions carefully rehearsed, their voices measured and full of regret, spinning their final, desperate attempt at rewriting the story. We love all our children equally, my mother said, voice quivering on command. We never meant to hurt anyone. We just want our family to heal. We've made mistakes, my father admitted, his face full of feigned remorse. But at the end of the day, family is family. The message was clear. They weren't trying to fix things with me. They were trying to fix public perception. But they had already lost control. Because the world had seen the truth. and no carefully worded statement could erase it. I watched from my apartment, sipping my coffee, shaking my head at the sheer audacity of it all. But I didn't respond, because I didn't need to. They had spent their lives erasing me. And now, I was the only one who mattered. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from my mother, handwritten, heartfelt, begging me to come home. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because I knew the truth. I was home. Not in the house that had once refused to see me. Not in the arms of people who only wanted me now because the world was watching. But in the life I had built without them. The letter sat unopened on my desk for 3 days. I wasn't sure why I didn't throw it away immediately. Maybe some part of me, the old me, the one who spent years waiting for scraps of acknowledgement, still wanted to believe that there was something inside worth reading. That maybe for once, my mother had written something real. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't a letter of love. It was damage control, and I wasn't playing their game anymore. So, on the 3rd day, I picked it up, walked to my balcony, and without hesitating, tore it in half. Then in half again, and again, until it was nothing but shredded pieces of a past I no longer belonged to. I let the wind carry it away, and with it, every last piece of their control over me. Life moved on, without them, and it was better than I had ever imagined. The fashion world embraced me, not just as a model but as a force of my own making. I signed deals with brands that celebrated individuality, campaigns that showcased people who had been told they weren't enough and turned that pain into power. I saw my face on billboards, in magazines, on screens across the world. A face my parents once refused to put in their family portraits now being displayed in ways they could never erase. And the best part? I didn't do it to prove them wrong. I did it for myself, because I had spent years trying to fit into their world, when all along, I was meant to build my own. Then one day, the inevitable happened. I ran into them. I was in a high-end restaurant having dinner with a few close friends when I saw them walk in. My mother, still carefully polished, her hair styled to perfection, her jewelry expensive but tastefully understated. My father, still dressed like a man who expected the world to respect him on sight, his presence heavy with the same quiet arrogance he had carried my entire life. And trailing behind them, Lily and Nathan, their perfect family. Without me, again. Some things never change, and yet, something had changed. Me. Because when I saw them, I felt nothing. No longing, no pain, no anger, just distance. Like they were strangers wearing the faces of people I used to know. I turned back to my meal, ignoring them completely. But they had seen me, and they weren't going to let me go unnoticed. It was my mother who approached first, slipping between the tables with the same graceful ease she had always carried. She stopped beside me, hesitating, as if she wasn't sure how to begin. Finally, she spoke. "You look beautiful." The words were hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to say them, like she had never imagined a world where I thrived without her approval. I set my fork down, meeting her gaze. "I know." She blinked, startled by my answer, because the old me would have deflected, would have shrunk under the weight of her attention, would have searched for validation in her words. But I didn't need her validation anymore. I never did. Nathan and Lily hovered a few feet away, watching. My father stood at a distance, his face unreadable. For once, they were the ones waiting for me to say something, to invite them back in, to give them a chance to pretend that nothing had ever happened. But I had no interest in rewriting history for their comfort. I tilted my head. "Why are you here?" My mother swallowed. "We miss you." A slow, amused smile spread across my lips. "No, you miss control." She flinched. And there it was. The truth they could never admit. The silence stretched between us, thick and full of every unspoken thing we would never say. Then finally she asked, "Can we talk? Privately?" I picked up my juice glass, swirling the liquid slowly. "There's nothing left to say." Her breath hitched. "We're still your family." I took a sip, savoring the taste, then set the glass down with deliberate slowness. "Funny," I said. "You never seemed to remember that when it mattered." Her expression crumbled. She had no comeback, no way to twist the situation in her favor. Because the truth was, there was no fixing this. They had spent years making me feel invisible, and now they were the ones being ignored. I stood, tossing a few bills onto the table to cover my meal. Then I looked at her one last time, at all of them, and I smiled. Not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but because I had already won. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them. I had spent my entire life waiting to be included, to be seen, to be loved by people who had never been capable of loving me in the first place. But I wasn't waiting anymore, because I had already found everything I needed. So I walked away, not because they pushed me out, not because they ignored me, not because they chose to erase me, but because I chose to leave, on my own terms, in my own way, in my own story, where they were no longer the main characters. My parents told me I wasn't smart enough for college. Now they want me to pay for my brother's tuition. Growing up, I always knew where I stood in my family. There was no need for whispered secrets or hidden favoritism. My parents made it painfully obvious. There were two roles in our household. My brother, Matthew, the golden child, the prodigy, the one whose every achievement was celebrated with grand gestures and endless support. And then there was me, the disappointment, the one who never quite measured up, the one who was never good enough. I learned early on that expectations were different for the two of us. When Matthew got straight A's, they framed his report cards and hung them on the wall like trophies. When I struggled in math, they shook their heads and muttered that school just wasn't my thing. When he won a spelling bee, they threw him a party. When I won third place in an art competition, they barely acknowledged it, reminding me that art doesn't pay the bills. And when it came time to talk about college, there was never a discussion, not for me. College isn't for everyone, my dad had said, his tone dismissive, final. Some people are just better off working with their hands. I was 15. I remember the way my stomach had twisted, the way my fingers had curled into my palms, nails biting into skin. It hadn't been a question. It had been a statement, an expectation, a sentence. It didn't matter that I wanted to go. It didn't matter that I had dreams beyond stocking shelves or working minimum wage jobs. What mattered was that they had already decided for me, before I had even been given a chance. But Matthew, oh, for him the world was laid out on a silver platter. Tutors, SAT prep courses, college visits to prestigious universities. Every opportunity he wanted, every resource he needed, it was his without question. I watched from the sidelines, silent, bitter, swallowing back the resentment that grew like poison in my gut. They never once considered that I could have been smart enough if they had just believed in me. But they never did. So I stopped waiting for them to. I left home at 18, the day after graduation. There was no tearful goodbye, no sentimental farewell. Just my mom sighing as she handed me a half-heartedly packed bag, my dad muttering something about how life was going to be hard without their support, and Matthew barely looking up from his phone to acknowledge that I was leaving. Fine. I didn't need them. I worked my way up from nothing. No degree, no family safety net, just sheer relentless determination. I took jobs no one else wanted, learned skills on my own, taught myself everything they told me I wasn't smart enough to understand. I built my own life, my own success, without them. And then, years later, after all their neglect, all their doubt, all their indifference, they called me. And I should have known, the moment I saw my mother's name flash across my screen, that they didn't call because they missed me. They called because they wanted something. I let the phone ring twice before answering, keeping my voice neutral. Hello? There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional, before my mother's voice came through, carefully measured, just a little too sweet. Daniel, sweetheart, it's been so long. I leaned back in my chair, a bitter smirk curling at my lips. Sweetheart. She hadn't called me that in years. Yeah, I said dryly. It has. Another pause. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, the forced warmth, the fake concern. How have you been? We haven't heard from you in... Oh, well, you know how time flies. Time flies. As if she had ever once picked up the phone to check on me. as if the distance between us had been some accidental thing rather than a deliberate choice on their part. I exhaled slowly, keeping my tone even. I've been good, busy, working. That's wonderful, honey. A forced laugh. Your father and I were just talking about you the other day. You've really made something of yourself, haven't you? Ah, there it is. They never cared before. But now suddenly, my success mattered. Now suddenly, I was worth talking about. I didn't answer, waiting. And then, like I knew she would, she finally got to the real reason for the call. We were hoping to talk to you about something, she said, her voice shifting, smoothing out into that carefully controlled tone she always used when she was about to ask for something. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. She hesitated, then pressed on. It's about your brother. Of course it was. Matthew, the son they had always wanted, the one who could do no wrong. I stayed quiet. Well, she continued, as you know, he got into a really good school. He's so bright, Daniel, he's going to do amazing things. But, well, tuition is so expensive and... I cut her off. Let me guess. You want me to pay for it? Another pause. Then, the inevitable guilt trip. I hope you know what you're doing, Daniel. Family always comes first. I smiled, sharp and cruel. Yeah? Funny. You never seemed to believe that when it was me who needed help. And with that, I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, waiting for the anger to fade. It didn't. But something else settled in its place. The call had ended, but the anger lingered, burning slow and steady in my chest like an ember that refused to die out. I should have expected this. I did expect it. Yet somehow, hearing my mother say the words out loud, hearing the sheer entitlement in her voice, made it all feel so much worse. They had never believed in me, never encouraged me, never once told me I was capable of more than scraping by. But now that I had built something for myself, now that I had succeeded despite every single way they had tried to hold me back, I was supposed to save them? I leaned back in my chair, staring at my phone, half expecting another call, another attempt, another guilt trip. Nothing, not yet. But I knew my family well enough to know this wasn't over. It took less than 24 hours for them to regroup. The next evening I was in my apartment, enjoying a rare moment of quiet, when my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was Matthew. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. The logical part of me knew that nothing good would come from this conversation. But there was a tiny part of me, a part buried deep beneath years of resentment, that wondered if maybe, just maybe, this would be different. I sighed and answered. Hello? Dude, Matthew's voice came through, laced with disbelief. What the hell? I exhaled slowly, already bracing myself. What? Mom called me crying, he said, as if that was supposed to mean something to me. She said you refused to help, that you just shut her down. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, I did. Matthew scoffed. Are you serious right now? I rubbed my temple, feeling the exhaustion creep in. Matthew, let's cut the bullshit. You know as well as I do that Mom and Dad never gave a damn about my future. They didn't help me when I needed it. But now that you need something, suddenly it's my responsibility. Tell me how that makes sense. There was a pause, then a scoff. You're just being petty. I laughed, short and bitter. Petty? Yeah, he snapped. You're holding a grudge over something that happened years ago. Man, let it go. I felt something sharp twist in my chest, but I forced my voice to stay calm. You want me to let it go because you don't have to deal with the consequences, because you were never the one left behind. Matthew groaned, exasperated. Come on, dude. It's college. It's my future. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. Funny how you care about futures now. Where was that concern when I was trying to figure out mine? Oh, right. You were too busy being the golden child. That's not fair. No, I snapped. What's not fair is that they told me I wasn't worth investing in. That they shoved me into the workforce without a second thought while you got tutors, prep courses, and endless support. And now they want me to cover the bill? Number absolutely not. Matthew sighed heavily, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Look, man, I get it. I do. But this is family. I do the same for you. I laughed outright at that. Would you? Of course. Then where were you when I was working 2 jobs just to afford rent? Where were you when I needed help? Silence. That was the thing about people like Matthew. They always said they would do the right thing, when they weren't the ones actually being tested. Look, he tried again, his voice softening. This isn't about the past, it's about the now. You have the money, you can afford it, and Mom and Dad said they'd pay you back eventually. I nearly dropped my phone from the sheer absurdity of that statement. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to keep my voice level. Matthew, you and I both know they will never pay me back. Another pause. Then quietly. Yeah, probably not. That admission, small as it was, made something inside me snap. So, why are you even asking me to do this? I said, my voice calmer now, but no less sharp. Why do you think I should be responsible for fixing their mistakes? Why am I the backup plan for their failures? Matthew was silent for a long moment. Then finally he said, because you're the only one who can. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. And that was the moment I realized the truth. Matthew wasn't asking because he thought I owed him. He was asking because he knew our parents would never help him the way they had promised. Because deep down, beneath all the entitlement, beneath all the expectation, he knew they only cared when it was convenient, and he was on the other side of it. I should have felt some kind of twisted satisfaction in that. But all I felt was tired. I exhaled. I'm not paying for your tuition. Daniel, I'm not, I repeated firm. And if you're smart, you won't rely on them either. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that the second you stop being useful to them, they'll drop you just like they did to me. Matthew was silent. Then, almost too quiet to hear, he muttered, I know. That admission should have meant something, but it didn't change a thing. The fallout came fast. By the next morning, my mother had sent me a series of furious texts, oscillating between guilt-tripping, I can't believe you'd do this to your own brother, and gaslighting. We never said you weren't smart enough for college. That's just something you made up in your head. Aunt Linda chimed in next, because of course, my mother had to call in reinforcements. Aunt Linda, your parents sacrificed so much for you, Daniel. The least you could do is help them now. Me. They didn't sacrifice for me. They sacrificed me for Matthew. Silence. Then finally a text from my father. Short, blunt, cold. Dad, you've made your choice. Don't expect us to be there when you need us. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then chuckled softly. Me. You never were. And with that, I blocked their numbers. The first real peace I had felt in years settled over me as I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. They had always held power over me, through manipulation, through guilt, through control. But they didn't anymore. Blocking their numbers should have been the end of it. But my parents were nothing if not persistent. 2 weeks passed without a word. 2 blissful weeks where my phone remained silent, where I didn't have to listen to my mother's guilt trips or my father's cold ultimatums. No texts, no calls, nothing. I felt free. Then, one evening, a familiar number flashed across my screen. Matthew. I stared at the phone, debating whether to answer. After everything that had happened, after all the ways our family had used me, part of me wanted to let it ring. But something in my gut told me this wasn't just another attempt to guilt me. I sighed and picked up. What? There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. They kicked me out. I blinked, momentarily stunned. What? Matthew let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, you were right. The second I wasn't useful to them anymore, they dropped me, just like they did to you. I frowned. What happened? The tuition, he admitted. They kept telling me they'd figure it out, that they'd get a loan, that I just needed to focus on school. But they didn't. And when the university finally said my tuition was overdue, I got a call from Dad. He told me I needed to take out a loan myself, that it was my responsibility now. I exhaled. Let me guess. You asked why they didn't just help you since they'd promised. Matthew chuckled, but it was hollow. Yep. And guess what they said? They already sacrificed enough for me, that they had done their part. My stomach twisted. It was exactly what they had told me when I left at 18. They got mad when I pushed back, Matthew continued. Said I was being ungrateful, that I should appreciate everything they had done for me. But then I told them they should ask you for money again, since, you're so successful now. I sighed. And? They lost it, he said. Told me I was choosing your side and that if I felt that way, I could figure life out on my own. I sat in silence, digesting that. Matthew had always been their favorite, their golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. And now, even he wasn't immune to their selfishness. For years, I had watched my parents treat me like an afterthought. I had swallowed the bitterness, endured the neglect, fought for every scrap of success I had. And all that time Matthew had been sitting on the other side, basking in the privileges I never got. But now he knew. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay neutral. Where are you staying? Another pause. Nowhere, he admitted. Crashing with a friend for now. But it's not permanent. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand over my face. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it. The choice. I had spent my entire life being the forgotten child, the one they dismissed. I had clawed my way up from nothing, built my own success, survived without them. And now, my brother, the one who had everything handed to him, was standing at the edge of the same abyss I had once been shoved into. I should have felt satisfied, but all I felt was tired. Daniel? Matthew's voice was hesitant. Look, I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know I've been a shitty brother. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes. Then, after a long silence, I spoke. You have two options, I said. You can go crawling back to them, beg, try to convince them to take you back. But you and I both know how that ends. Matthew didn't say anything. Or, I continued, you start over. Like I did. You figure it out on your own. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come out of it stronger. A shaky breath. How did you do it? I exhaled. I stopped expecting them to care. Another silence. Then, softly, yeah, I think I'm done expecting that too. A month passed. Then two. My parents tried once more to reach out, this time through extended family. My aunt called, my uncle left a voicemail, even a distant cousin I barely spoke to messaged me out of nowhere, all with the same scripted plea. Your parents are struggling, Daniel. They're heartbroken. Families shouldn't fight over money. I ignored every single one of them. I knew the truth. They weren't struggling. They weren't heartbroken. They were just angry that they had lost control, and they would never get it back. As for Matthew, he struggled at first. He had never lived without a safety net, had never been forced to stand on his own. He bounced between friends' couches, took a job that barely covered rent, and learned what it felt like to be the one left behind. But then, he adjusted. Slowly, painfully. But he did. We weren't close. We probably never would be. But one evening, months after that phone call, I got a simple text from him. Matthew, I get it now. I stared at it for a long time. Then, after a moment, I typed back, me. Good. I never spoke to my parents again. Years passed. They must have realized at some point that their golden child wasn't coming back, and that I was no longer someone they could control. They had spent their entire lives betting on the wrong son,